Hi everyone, I'm back to read chapter 4 of our book, Marie Grace and the Orphans, from 1853, book 3, and chapter 4 is called A Secret Plan. On Saturday morning, a misty rain fell as Marie Grace hurried to the Royal Music Hall. She tried to walk under the balconies that jetted out over the sidewalks, but both she and Argos were damp when they arrived at the music hall's back entrance. Louis, the building's watchman, opened the door for them. "Bonjour, Marie Grace," he said cheerfully. "Bonjour, Marie Grace," replied with a smile. Over the last few months, she and Argos had become friends with the elderly watchman. Every Saturday, Argos stayed with Louis, while Marie Grace went to her music lessons. Louis often gave treats to the dog, and this morning he had a special surprise for Argos. "My wife wanted to use this in our soup, but I saved it for you, mon ami," said Louis as he handed Argos a meaty bone. Argos thudded his tail happily and settled down by Louis's chair. Marie Grace thanked Louis and patted Argos goodbye. Then she made her way down the long hall lined with portraits of famous musicians. She reached the grand entryway just as Cecile came in. "What has happened?" Marie Grace asked the moment she saw Marie Grace. There was concern in her voice, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. A bearded man carrying a cello walked by and looked questioningly at the girls. "Let's go upstairs," Marie Grace said. "I'll tell you everything." The upstairs hall was deserted, and the two girls settled themselves on a chintz-covered bench outside Mademoiselle Ocean's studio. As the rain drizzled against the window, Marie Grace told her friend all about Philip. "A baby?" Cecile gasped. "Someone left him on your doorstep? Oh, that poor little boy." Marie Grace nodded. "I brought him inside, and when I sang to him, he stopped crying." "Well, babies cry a lot," Cecile said, pulling off her white gloves. "I remember my little cousin René when he was a baby. He cried all the time." "Philip hardly ever cries now," Marie Grace said loyally, even though it was not exactly true. "But that's not the problem," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Philip is in danger. A man came looking for him." Marie Grace told Cecile about Mr. Hurst's claim that Philip belonged to the Rigby plantation. Cecile's eyes widened. "Oh, no," she said. "Is the baby's mother a slave?" "It's possible," Marie Grace answered. She nervously twisted her skirt in her hands. "My papa says we may never know. He says we can't even be sure that the woman who left the baby with us was his mother." "Is Mr. Hurst going to take Philip away?" Cecile asked anxiously. "We can't let him," exclaimed Marie Grace. Her voice echoed in the empty hallway. She lowered it to a whisper again and said, "Philip would grow up as a slave." Cecile shuddered. "The law says that if a baby's mother is a slave, then the baby is a slave too." "My grandfather says that the law isn't right. He says everyone deserves to be free." Her face was serious. "My family would never, ever keep slaves." Marie Grace nodded. "We have to help Philip," she said, her voice trembling. "Papa says we should take him to Holy Trinity Orphanage. It's for white children, so Mr. Hurst won't look for him there." Cecile's face brightened. "My mother knows one of the nuns there. They will take good care of Philip." "I hope so," said Marie Grace, staring down at the floor. "First, we have to get him into Holy Trinity. If the priest thinks that Philip is a child of color, he couldn't let him stay. He couldn't let him in. So I've been thinking, remember when we changed places at the Mardi Gras ball? Everyone looked at our costumes, not at us." "I remember," said Cecile. She looked confused. "But what does that have to do with the baby?" "The only clothes Philip has now are worn and patched," Marie Grace said. "What if we dressed him up? If he was wearing the kind of clothes that babies in fancy carriages wear, then no one would guess that he might be a slave baby." Cecile finished for her. "Exactly," Marie Grace agreed excitedly. "But I need your help. There are no fancy baby clothes at my house. Cecile grinned. My aunt has a trunk full of Renee's baby clothes. Some have beautiful lace. I'm sure she won't let me borrow some. Would you ask her? Cecile did not hesitate. Of course. Marie Grace sighed with relief. That would be wonderful, she exclaimed. But remember, we can't tell anyone about this unless we're sure we can trust them. Otherwise, Philip... Marie Grace could not finish her sentence. The possibility of Mr. Hurst trying to carry Philip away was too terrible to even think about. I'll do whatever I can to help, Cecile said, and she squeezed Marie Grace's arm reassuringly. Then she and Marie Grace began to discuss what clothes would be best for Philip. They became so involved in their plan that they didn't even hear Mademoiselle Oceane arrive. What are you two whispering about? Asked Mademoiselle with a smile. Marie Grace and Cecile shared a glance. Mademoiselle Oceane was more than a teacher. She was a friend who could be trusted. It's very important, Marie Grace said. Then let's go inside, Mademoiselle suggested. We have a few minutes before it's time for your lesson, Cecile. In the studio, the girls told Mademoiselle Oceane all about Philip and their plan to get him into the orphanage. Les pauvres petits, the poor little boy, exclaimed Mademoiselle. She thought for a moment, and then she said, I think I have just the thing to help. Mademoiselle Oceane went to the back of the studio where she kept her costume trunks and a sewing basket. She brought out several yards of finely woven cotton. The bright blue fabric reminded Marie Grace of the sky on a summer day. This would make a very nice blanket for a baby, no? Yes, both girls agreed. Mademoiselle cut the generous square of the cotton and gave Marie Grace a needle and thread. You can hem the blanket while Cecile has her lesson. The next hour passed quickly for Marie Grace. Outside, the rain stopped and the sun broke through the clouds. Inside, Marie Grace sat by the window and happily sewed her best stitches. She liked listening to Mademoiselle Oceane and Cecile sing together, and sometimes they invited her to join in on the chorus of a song. Ever since her mother and brother had died, Marie Grace had often felt lonely, especially when her father worked long hours. Now, with her teacher and her friend, she felt as if she were part of a happy family. If we can get Philip into Holy Trinity, she thought, he'll be safe, and I can visit him and play with him. It will be almost like having a brother again. When Cecile's lessons was finished, Mademoiselle Oceane admired Marie Grace's careful stitching, and Cecile ran her hand over the silky smooth fabric. This is such pretty material, Cecile exclaimed. You could use it to make something for a trousseau. Marie Grace was puzzled. What's a trousseau? It's what we in France call the linens and gowns that a young lady sews before she is married, exclaimed Mademoiselle Oceane, her eyes shining. Oh, said Marie Grace. Then a thought suddenly occurred to her. Are you sewing your trousseau, Mademoiselle? Before Mademoiselle Oceane could answer, Cecile blurted out, Are you getting married soon, Mademoiselle? Oui, yes. Well, I hope so, Mademoiselle stammered. Smiling, she turned to Marie Grace. Your Uncle Luke has proposed. Marie Grace was so surprised that she dropped her sewing needle. Together, she and Cecile peppered Mademoiselle with questions. Did you accept? Marie Grace asked. When is the wedding? Cecile added. Calm yourself, said Marie Oceane, laughing. First, let's have tea. She poured steaming tea into delicate china cups and put out a plate of crisp cookies. Then, as they sat together in the sunny studio, she explained that Marie Grace's uncle, Luc Rousseau, had proposed 2 weeks ago. Mademoiselle had said yes, and he had written to her father in France asking for permission. Once my papa has approved, and I am sure he will, we will have a wedding in the cathedral, and you girls will be invited. Mademoiselle promised. She added that after the wedding, She and Monsieur Rousseau planned to travel by steamboat to the little town of Belchenier, not far from New Orleans, to visit the whole Rousseau family. You and your papa should come along, she urged Marie Grace. They are your family, too. I would like that very much, Marie Grace said excitedly. Uncle Luc was her mother's brother, and he and Mama had grown up in Belchenier. As Marie Grace picked up her needle to finish hemming the blanket, she thought about how wonderful it would be to visit her relatives with Uncle Luc and his new bride. A wedding, Cecile sighed with happiness. I love weddings, and you will make a beautiful bride, Mademoiselle. I can hardly wait. Merci, said Mademoiselle. Thank you, but we must be patient. It will take several weeks before we get my father's reply from France, so the wedding will not be until late summer. Cecile frowned. Oh, Mademoiselle, you should not get married in the summer. Why ever not? Asked Mademoiselle. It gets very hot, so lots of people leave New Orleans. Cecile warned. Some people go away because they are afraid of getting sick. She shook her head. It would not be a good time for a wedding. Marie Grace looked up from her sewing. She'd heard about wealthy people spending the summer in the country or along the Mississippi River where it was cooler, but it hadn't occurred to her that Cecile or Mademoiselle Oceane might go away too. Does your family leave? She asked Cecile, dreading the answer. No, Cecile replied. It's different for us. My papa has his business here, so we stay. Besides, we've lived in New Orleans all our lives. We are not so likely to get sick, but for newcomers, it's different. I'm not going to leave either, said Mademoiselle Oceane firmly. I've been in New Orleans since last October. I'm hardly a newcomer, and I don't mind heat either. Monsieur Rousseau and I will live here throughout the year, so there's no reason we shouldn't get married over the summer. Marie Grace smiled with relief and made another stitch. She could hardly wait for Mademoiselle Oceane and Uncle Luc to be married. She will be my aunt then, Marie Grace thought, as she pulled the thread through the fabric. Then we'll truly be family. On Wednesday afternoon, a line of patients gathered outside Dr. Gardner's office. There was a man with broken ribs, a woman who had burned herself while cooking, and a child with a bad cough. I'm sorry, Grace, said Papa as he paused between patients. I won't be able to go with you to the orphanage. You and Mrs. Lambert will have to take Philip. You'd better leave soon. We will, Papa, very soon, said Marie Grace, watching the street through the office window. Ever since she'd come home from school, she'd been waiting for Cecile to arrive with the baby clothes. Where can Cecile be? She wondered. Marie Grace went out to the courtyard. Mrs. Lambert had just bathed Philip with sweet-smelling soap, and now she was putting him in a clean diaper. Philip was howling in protest. I thought you said he never cried, said a familiar voice. Marie Grace turned and saw Cecile standing by the courtyard gate. The Cecile's maid, Ellen, stood by a carriage in the street behind her. Oh, thank heavens you're here, said Marie Grace, rushing over to her friend. Were you able to get a baby gown? Yes, said Cecile enthusiastically, and my aunt says you can keep it. She opened a paper package, and inside was a carefully ironed white cotton gown trimmed with lace. It has a bonnet too, she added, pulling out a matching cap. Oh, they're perfect, exclaimed Marie Grace, admiring the fine lace. Come and meet Philip. I can only stay for a moment, Cecile said, glancing back at the waiting carriage. Then she grinned at Marie Grace. But I can't wait to see him. As the girls crossed the courtyard, Cecile looked at the patients lined up outside the office door. Why are all those people here? She asked. They're waiting for Papa, said Marie Grace proudly. He's a very good doctor. People come from all over New Orleans to see him. Argos was resting in the shade next to Philip's basket. And as the girls approached, he stood and gave Cecile a friendly nuzzle. Cecile wrinkled her nose at the dog's greeting, but she smiled as soon as she saw Philip. The baby had stopped crying, and he looked at Cecile with wide-eyed curiosity. "He's so tiny," Cecile exclaimed. "Hello, Philip," she whispered, gently touching his hand. Philip grabbed her finger and gurgled happily. Both girls laughed. "I think he likes his name," Marie Grace told her friend. "Let's see if the clothes fit," Cecile suggested. Together the girls carefully dressed Philip in a lace-trimmed gown. "He looks beautiful," Cecile said. "He looks like a prince," agreed Marie Grace, as she covered Philip with a blue blanket she had hemmed. Marie Grace felt a lump in her throat. She swallowed hard. "Thank you, Cecile," she said. "Miss Cecile," Ellen called from the gate, "what will your mamma say if you are late to tea?" "I have to go," Cecile said reluctantly. She touched Philip's cheek, and then she turned to Marie Grace. "I'm sure the plan will work," she reassured her friend. How could anyone turn down such a sweet baby? As Cecile climbed into her carriage, Mrs. Lambert admired Philip. "I've seen a lot of babies, but I've never seen a prettier one," she said. "Those new clothes do him proud." Then Mrs. Lambert sighed. "I suppose we should go now, shouldn't we?" Marie Grace nodded sadly. She smoothed his curls and put on his bonnet. And on the way to the orphanage, Marie Grace and Mrs. Lambert took turns carrying Philip's basket. Argos followed close behind, his tail hanging low, as if he knew that Philip was going away. When they arrived at Holy Trinity, a sturdy-looking nun with bright blue eyes bustled out to welcome them. She introduced herself as Sister Beatrice. "What a beautiful baby," she said, smiling at Philip. "Come with me. I'll take you to see Father Sebastian. He's expecting you." The nun led them through a large courtyard behind the building. Marie Grace saw several children, small children, laughing and shouting in a game of tag. She was relieved that the children looked happy and that Sister Beatrice seemed kind. Sister Beatrice ushered them into the dark office where a priest sat behind a mahogany table. Father Sebastian was an old man with a fringe of white hair around his bald head. He motioned for them to put the basket on the table. "So this is the child who was left on Dr. Gardner's doorstep, eh?" he asked, glancing at Philip, who was asleep. "Yes, Father," said Mrs. Lambert, smoothing Philip's blanket. The priest turned to Marie Grace. "Your father says you were the one who found him. Was there a note of any kind?" "No, Father," Marie Grace tried to answer calmly, but her voice squeaked. Father Sebastian leaned over and peered at Philip. Marie Grace was so nervous she could hardly breathe. "Please let him say yes," she thought. Finally, Father Sebastian looked up. "This baby should not be here," he said, shaking his head sadly. There was a stunned silence in the small office. Marie Grace felt her stomach flip-flop. "But he's an orphan," she burst out. "And he needs a home," added Mrs. Lambert, her face flushed. "Why shouldn't he be here, Father?" "Because he is obviously from a wealthy family," the priest exclaimed. "There must be a very sad story somewhere." He shook his head again. "But I will enter him in the ledger." "What have you called him?" "Philip," said Marie Grace. As she watched Father Sebastian write the name in the heavy-bound book, she felt her stomach twist again. She was relieved that the plan had worked. Philip was safe now. Mr. Hurst would not look for him at Holy Trinity. But she would miss Philip terribly. Who will sing to him when he cries, she wondered. Sister Beatrice seemed to read Marie Grace's thoughts. "Don't worry," she said, picking up the basket. "We'll take good care of Philip. You can visit him whenever you like. In fact, all the children enjoy having visitors." "I'll be here tomorrow," Marie Grace promised. All right, and that is the end of Chapter 4. And next time we'll read Chapter 5 of Marie Grace and the Orphans from 1853, Book 3.